The success-oriented pragmatic type, adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious.
Jeff, you said you had something you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to, now that we have an actual, like, tangible beginnings of a plot rather than a set of open-ended possibilities, I wanted to quickly revisit the 36 to see which ones are jumping out and grabbing me by the throat. Like, disaster, revolt is very, very central. Daring enterprise, madness, rivalry of superior and inferior is really interesting because it's like this kind of it's this robot versus the sun. And who's the superior? Who has the upper hand? Which is very much a matter of perception, because the sun could think he's way in charge and the robot could be working circles around him, like have, connection to the whole factory and everything. But the sun could then trump that and be like, like, who's the superior in any given situation, and or the perception of who's superior. The sun can think he's superior when he's not, and the vice versa with the robot. So it's a very active element in this story, and it goes hand in glove with conflict with a god, ambition, madness, revolt. You can see how some of those kind of form a molecule that constitute the core of this story. So I just wanted to do a quick run through and see which ones are jumping right out at me. And it's interesting here, looking back at an automaton wants to steal or wants to stop the theft of. Interesting. A medicine and a contagion. There's a death. The innocent will suffer, but it means giving up their dreams. See, now that has real traction, because if he's going to become human and he's actually exhibiting aspects of being a human now, like being giddy and having fun, it's like the gods becoming mortal. He gets to experience some of what humans experience. So he doesn't want to give up on that dream. He's now got more of a dream to give up on. And wish granting is more active here. And treachery and glory, these are solidifying. So what I would do now would be to take a look at the Enneagram, which is a personality profiling system that is a combination of ancient wisdom about human nature and cutting-edge psychology. And what I'm looking at here is this comes from a website called the Enneagram Institute.com, and Enneagram is ENNEAGRAM. And it basically says that there's 9 different personality types, and each of those types has their own preferences, fears, motivations, drives, subconscious attitudes, relationship to the world, and so on. And so in going through it, I would be looking at a brief description of all 9 types and seeing if any of them jump out at us for the only 3 characters we actually have at this point, which is the automaton, the son, and the dead father. So type number 1 is the reformer, the rational idealistic type, principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionistic. Basic fear of being corrupt, evil, or defective. And each of the 9 types has healthy aspects, average aspects, and unhealthy aspects. So type 1, the reformer, the rational idealistic type, principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionistic, certainly seems like it could possibly be the robot. The thing about this is they have an extreme sense of justice, of right and wrong. And they really want to make the wrongs into rights. But as they get into the average and unhealthy aspects, they become rigid and, well, let me just read a little bit from the healthy aspect of a type 1. Conscientious with strong personal convictions, they have an intense sense of right and wrong, personal, religious, and moral values, wish to be rational, reasonable, self-disciplined, mature, and moderate. That sounds like Spock and could be this AI or whatever it is. In the average aspect, dissatisfied with reality, they become high-minded idealists, feeling that it is up to them to improve everything. Crusaders, advocates, critics, into causes and explaining to others how things ought to be. They can be moralizing, scolding, abrasive, and indignantly angry. And in the unhealthy aspects, they can be highly dogmatic, self-righteous, intolerant, and inflexible. Begin dealing in absolutes. They alone know the truth. Everyone else is wrong. They're very severe in judgments. So I could also see the sun being this character, because the rigid, dogmatic aspects can be like Hitler going, I know best and I am saving the world for everybody else. Even though he's crazy and completely wrong, from his point of view, he's doing an important job. And it also brings up the question of how does a robot exhibit unhealthy aspects? But we've talked about that with corrupting the operating system and even putting some kind of catnip in there or something to make this robot giddy where it was formerly, like Data, like it doesn't get a joke or something like that. Type 2, the helper, the caring interpersonal type, generous, demonstrative, people-pleasing, and possessive. Basic fear of being unwanted, unworthy of being loved. The servant is one of those types. Empathic, compassionate, feeling for others, caring and concerned about their needs. I'm wondering if that could be the robot. It's not jumping out at me a lot. I'm not sure if a robot would feel unworthy of being loved. But it's worth taking a look at for a minute. Type 3, the achiever. The success-oriented pragmatic type. Adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. Basic fear of being worthless. Basic desire to be valuable and worthwhile.
That could be the sun.
It totally could be the sun. Yeah. And the healthy type 3 is self-assured, energetic, competent, with high self-esteem. They believe in themselves and their own value, adaptable, desirable, charming, and gracious. And even if the sun is unhealthy, he can exhibit these healthy attributes, even if it's just an act. But he can be charming, lovable, high-performing, fascinating. In the average aspect, highly concerned with their performance, with doing their job well, constantly driving self to achieve goals as if self-worth depended on it, terrified of failure, compare self with others in search for status and success, become careerists, social climbers, invested in exclusivity and being the best, become image conscious, highly concerned with how they are perceived, begin to package themselves according to the expectations of others and what they need to do to be successful. So 3s really care about what they look like to others. And the more unhealthy they get, the more desperate acts they'll do to keep looking good. So in the unhealthy, fearing failure and humiliation, they can be exploitative and opportunistic, covetous of the success of others, and willing to do whatever it takes to preserve the illusion of their superiority. Devious and deceptive, so their mistakes and wrongdoings will not be exposed. Untrustworthy, maliciously betraying or sabotaging people to triumph over them. So that's an interesting, strong possibility for the sun. And they say that the basic fear really drives each of these 9 types. And here, the basic fear for a type 3 is of being worthless. So really wants to feel valuable and worthwhile and is kind of irrationally desperate to overcome that subconscious belief that he is worthless. And it could be a she. It doesn't have to be a male. Everything's fluid at this point. Type 4, the individualist, the sensitive withdrawn type, expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental. Basic fear that they have no identity or personal significance. Basic desire to find themselves and their significance. So the healthy one is self-aware, introspective, on the search for self, aware of feelings and impulses, sensitive and intuitive. Average, take an artistic, romantic orientation to life, creating beautiful aesthetic environments, heighten reality through fantasy, and they want to sort out their emotions before they tackle anything else. Unhealthy, when dreams fail, becomes self-inhibiting and angry at self, depressed and alienated from self and others. I'm not sure if that feels like any of these three. Type 5, the investigator, the intense cerebral type, perceptive, innovative, secretive, and isolated. Basic fear being useless, helpless, or incapable. The basic desire to be capable and competent. And one of the types is the problem solver. And there's also the iconoclast. And it's possible that both the father and the automaton could share this type, but be slightly different. Like the father could be an iconoclast, one who really wants to shake things up and change things. And the automaton may be more of a problem solver, but maybe becomes an iconoclast, becomes revolutionary. The healthy aspect of a 5 is to observe everything with extraordinary perceptiveness and insight. Most mentally alert, curious, searching intelligence. Nothing escapes their notice. Foresight and prediction. Able to concentrate, become engrossed in what has caught their attention. Attain skillful mastery in whatever excites them, excited by knowledge, often become expert in some field, innovative and inventive, producing extremely valuable original works, highly independent, idiosyncratic, and whimsical. At their best, they become visionaries, broadly comprehending the world while penetrating it profoundly. So this is someone who sees things sort of differently from other people, is intensely smart, trying to get to the bottom of things, connecting things in unusual ways that most people don't, and can come up with innovative solutions. In the average aspect, can begin conceptualizing and fine-tuning everything before acting, working things out in their mind, model building, getting ready forever and never leaping into action is their worst trait. So in the unhealthy, become reclusive and isolated from reality, eccentric and nihilistic, highly unstable and fearful of aggressions, reject and repulse. I could see the father kind of going downhill at the end and sort of naturally being secretive, especially with a big organization and industrial espionage, and maybe got shafted by one of his top people and now doesn't trust anybody, then leans more on the robot and starts to reprogram the robot to be more like the one person I can trust. But then the father gets killed and the son starts to reprogram. So it's interesting possibilities. Type 6, the loyalist, the committed, security-oriented type, engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. The basic fear of being without support or guidance. The basic desire to have security and support. Now that's possibly interesting for the robot, because the basic fear of being without support or guidance, that we were talking early on about the possibility that if he is able to conjure the father back to life for a bit, that the father may say to him, you don't need me to tell you what to do. You can think, you know, form your own conclusions, take action. You know, that's what real people do. You want to be a person, that's the most important thing. Now, I don't know if that makes for a weak robot if it's always dependent on other people telling it what to do. It makes it feel less sophisticated. But that might be something that the son imbues the robot with more deeply by corrupting the operating system to make it more dependent and more showing up for orders rather than just knowing what to do. And feeling more like obeying orders is a critical part of his correct function. So it's conceivable. So in the healthy aspect, a type 6, the loyalist, is able to elicit strong emotional responses from others, very appealing, endearing, lovable, and affectionate. Now that's an interesting flavor for an AI, where it really is likable and it's like, hey, how you doing? Instead of greetings. You know, it could be programmed to be friendly. Trust is important, bonding with others, forming permanent relationships and alliances, dedicated to individuals and movements in which they deeply believe. In the average aspect, start investing their time and energy into whatever they believe will be safe and stable. Organizing and structuring, they look to alliances and authorities for security and continuity, constantly vigilant, anticipating problems. In the unhealthy aspect, fearing they have ruined their security, they become panicky, volatile, self-disparaging with acute inferiority feelings. Seeing themselves as defenseless, they seek out a stronger authority or belief to resolve all their problems. And that's interesting because in terms of potential crisis, if the sun has been corrupting the operating system, then this thing which would normally be as confident as Spock or Data, like, that's a ridiculous idea, here's the logical thing to do, and not going, I'm not sure if that's right, like having no uncertainty at all. The crisis could also consist in madness of a sort where this formerly supremely confident AI now has a lot of like self-doubt because, and it's been programmed to seek advice, seek orders. So right at the point when this automaton needs its own excellent judgment at the most critical point in this story, it's faltering. And one of the key, I think they nailed it in the book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, which has a 40-page chapter on each type instead of just a one sheet. It says the single most fundamental weakness of a 6 is lack of trust in their own judgment. They just lack of confidence. They're always looking to others, tell me what to do. And so, which is what the sun wants to do to this robot. It wants it to be malleable. And so this critical failure in confidence and autonomy and decision-making at the most critical moment, the most critical juncture in the story, is a great way to complicate the crisis, because it's not just things are happening externally which are disastrous and I got to leap into action, but at this point I trust my own, as the robot, I trust my own decision-making the least ever, and I'm kind of incapable of making a decision and taking an action at this critical juncture, which is also makes that decision and action to stand up even more dynamic because this robot is taking a leap of faith, or just it's one analogy that I use for decision and action in the face of crisis is that the crisis demands immediate decision and action. You no longer have the luxury of contemplating your dilemma from a distance. What am I going to do when I have to choose? So the crisis is akin to like you're really busy with something in the house and all caught up in it, and you look out the window and see your kid about to get hit by a truck on the street. You're not going, well, I'm in the middle of this recipe. It's like, no, you're like throwing the stool right through the kitchen window and getting cut to crap to get to the street before your kid gets flattened. Like, the decision is like instant. And it's like who you really are is right there. And that's the nature of decision and action in the face of crisis. It demands an immediate decision and action. So for this robot to leap into action, even if that's explosively contrary to some of the deepest current commands, shows what this robot's really made of. What the true personality of this, what the true character of this thing is. And that's what Aristotle said, decision and action in the face of crisis reveal the true character of the protagonist. And it can bring out the best in people, and it can also bring out the worst in people. So the person who jumps up and runs out screaming, or, somebody doesn't move when they saw your kid, about to get hit. They're like, hey, you should look out here. Like, why weren't you out the door before you even told me? It's like, I thought I knew you. Like, that's crazy. You watched for 3 seconds, frozen, and I went through the frickin' window while you stood there doing nothing. People react differently in emergencies, and it strips the mask off. And that's fascinating to the audience because in reality, we don't often see naked human emotional reality. It's so masked and covered and camouflaged in self-deception and rationalizations and all this stuff that helps us navigate the world and feel comfortable. But when you strip all that away and like, what are you going to do right now? Some people will run and some people will leap into action. And they themselves didn't know they were going to run away or leap into action. You see the people that rescued 10 people out of a burning house are like, I was more surprised than anybody when I ran in there. I didn't think I would ever do that, but my legs were running toward the house when I heard them screaming. So the loyalist, the type 6, is interested, the committed, security-oriented type, engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. It's interesting. Type 7, the enthusiast, the busy, fun-loving type, spontaneous, versatile, acquisitive, and scattered. Basic fear of being deprived and in pain, basic desire to be satisfied and content. They're highly responsive, excitable, enthusiastic about sensation and experience, most extroverted type. In the average aspect, as restlessness increases, they want to have more options and choices available to them, less focused, constantly seeking out new things. In the unhealthy aspect, desperate to quell their anxieties, can be impulsive and infantile, don't know when to stop. So I'm not sure if that fits anybody, except it might fit the robot as he's in that kind of giddy phase, always wanting the next distraction, but I'm not sure. Type 8, the challenger, the powerful, dominating type, self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. Basic fear of being harmed or controlled by others, basic desire to protect themselves, to be in control of their own life and destiny. And this could easily be the sun. Self-confident, self-assertive, self-confident, and strong, learn to stand up for what they need and want, resourceful, can-do attitude, and passionate inner drive, decisive and authoritative. In the average aspect, self-sufficiency, financial independence, and having enough resources are important concerns. Becoming enterprise, pragmatic, rugged individualists, wheeler dealers, risk-taking, hard-working, denying own emotional needs. In the unhealthy aspect, defying any attempt to control them, become completely ruthless, dictatorial, might makes right, the criminal and outlaw, renegade, and con artist. So that could certainly be the sun. Type 3 is interesting for the sun, and type 8. Then there's type 9, the peacemaker, the easygoing, self-effacing type, receptive, reassuring, agreeable, and complacent. Doesn't really feel like any of the characters in this story at first glance. So the robot could be a type 5 or a type 6.
And the sun is definitely a 3 or an 8. What do you think?
It could be a 3 or an 8. It really, that's the nature of this game, is that what it did is it gave us several strong possibilities, two strong possibilities for both the protagonist and the antagonist. And we don't need to go, oh, it's that, because what we want to do is navigate through the story more and keep in mind that a type 3 is high achieving but desperate to look good no matter what. A type 8 is powerful, dominating, can make things happen, can be a great leader. A healthy 8 is magnanimous, generous, insightful, giving others credit. An unhealthy 8 is desperate to maintain control and crush all opposition. So they're slightly different. And one may prove more useful as the story develops more. And we may not get to that point in the development of this story, but that's the process, that we're tentatively holding both of them as possibilities and seeing which one fits the demands of the story, or if the Enneagram type suggests possibilities for the story, then we may end up going with that one. Because the Enneagram offers a lot of specific traits for a character, and it's useful, like once you have a dilemma tentatively roughed out for the protagonist, which is what we have now, then it's interesting to look at, okay, so for that type of dilemma, like I can't let go of this chance to become a human, and it's like an irrational, it's not just, I wish I was a human, but it's like, I've got to become human. I'm desperate to get that. And I can't sacrifice people to get there, but I can't let go of that chance. So that particular dilemma, how does that go with a type 5, where the basic fear is of being useless, helpless, or incapable? And they're brilliant, and they're always questioning things and trying to get to the bottom of things, but they're all constantly model building and fine-tuning before they take action, and they can be reclusive and isolated from reality and get obsessed with dark imagery and so on. So is that type of dilemma, does a type 5, see, different personality types will interact with a dilemma in different ways. Like, if you're a type 3 and you're really concerned with how you appear to other people, then certain dilemmas will freak you out more than someone who's naturally relaxed and can sweep problems under the carpet, like a type 9, but they're relaxed and comfortable, or a type 8 who has to be in control all the time. So once you get a dilemma up and running, then it's useful to go through the different Enneagram types and see how would this type deal with that particular dilemma. And so looking at type 6 with that dilemma, to be with the basic fear, to be without support or guidance, trusting others. One of the things about a 6 is they're always hoping that the next person they link up with will be able to show them how to really navigate life properly. They attach on to people and go, are you the one that's going to show me how to really do my life right? So they're always, because they don't trust their own judgment. So they're like, you got to tell me because I can't do it. So with that type of personality, react to this dilemma more than a type 5. And, the fact that a type 6 is the average to unhealthy type. The healthy type 6 doesn't have that problem. The average to unhealthy type 6 really doesn't trust its own inner judgment because they're very mental. They're the top of the thought triad. There's thought, feeling, and I don't remember what the third one is. But the type 6 is the highest of the thought triad in the 9. So they're all mental activity, which in the average to unhealthy aspects means they're out of touch with their own inner guidance, their heart and their gut, because they're always got to think about it, but they can't feel their way through it, which makes them, and they know that they're not good decision makers because they're not in touch with their intuition and their internal guidance system. They're cut off from it. So if the sun is saying, I've made some modifications in you that get you closer to being a human, then that type 6 is like, this is what I need, especially if the operating system has been crippled in some ways so that it's less capable of making strong fundamental decisions at key points and is more reliant on the sun. And the sun is creating great reward system. And the average type 6 can become evasive, indecisive, cautious, procrastinating, and ambivalent. And that's kind of like where the sun needs him to be, as the sun is trying to manipulate him into helping sort of go against his own moral code or against his own inner programming or the way he's been programmed. So that's interesting. And I would leave that. We don't need to solve that at this point. That's something that you leave those possibilities floating as the story gets developed further. And one of them will probably like, oh, this one is I can see more and more that it's this one. Or it may be like, we were wrong on both of them, it's really this. But you just have a flexibility, it's a tentative answer. And the other thing is that people in general are often uncomfortable with partial solutions. You know, like we're in now, where it's like, I'm not really sure, but I'm very used to making tentative decisions and floating them both as possibilities as we move forward, just kind of going, oh, it could be this or this, and time will tell as we explore more. But people who are like, I don't want to be halfway through to an answer, I don't like that, so then they jump to conclusions and go, okay, it's got to be that. And they've cut off, they say experts in creativity know that there's often 10 right answers to a problem. The people that don't know that, when they find one of the 10 right answers, they go, oh, that's it. But then they stop questioning and they stop looking, and they're missing on the whole spectrum of what is the right answer. And that's what jumping to conclusions is too. You can even be wildly wrong, but you're like, I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm desperate to not be partially formed. I can't be halfway to a solution.